Yuma, hello in the language of the Ngunnawal people, the traditional owners of the nation's capital, the land on which Canberra is built. I'm Misha Schubert, the CEO of Science and Technology Australia, which is of course the peak body for the science and tech sectors across this country. Thank you so much for joining us for a terrific discussion today with our expert panel, wrestling with the question of how Australia goes about preparing our workforce for an AI-enabled future. We want to begin by acknowledging the country on which we meet across Australia today and paying our respects to traditional owners right across the country and connecting ourselves, as we do in Australia, with the long story of our country and the deep knowledge systems across 65,000 plus years of continuing culture that is the rich, long story of Australia. And when we do that, we invite all Australians to connect with the story of the longest continuing cultures anywhere on the planet, and what a source of inspiration and pride that is for all Australians today. We're going to have a terrific discussion today with a fabulous expert panel. Dr. Audrey Lobopulo is, of course, LinkedIn Senior Public Policy and Economic Graph Manager for Australia and New Zealand. She's also part of the World Economic Forum's expert network on the future of the digital economy and society, civic participation, and the future of government. And she's a physicist with a PhD and has a master's in economic policy, so she's incredibly well qualified. She's also spent some time working in senior roles in the Australian Treasury, looking at deep impact of major trends that will affect our community and economy. Jeremy Howard is the founding researcher of Fast.ai. He's also a data scientist, researcher, developer, educator, and entrepreneur. Jeremy is, of course, the founding researcher at Fast.ai, which is dedicated to making deep learning more accessible to more people around the world, and is a distinguished research scientist at the University of San Francisco. He's also the chair of WAMRI and is chief scientist at Platform.ai. He's founded a number of startups, AI companies, including Kaggle and Fastmail, and a series of entrepreneurial ventures. So he'll be bringing his expertise to this discussion, wearing all of those hats as well. And our third eminent panellist is Professor Enrico Coiera, who is, of course, the director of the Centre for Health Informatics at the Australian Institute of Health Innovation. He's a PhD in computer science, in artificial intelligence, and has a research background in both industry and academia, so can speak to some of the big shifts we're going to see across our society, economy, and workplaces with the benefit of both of those perspectives. So today we're going to have a really terrific conversation about how do we prepare Australia's workforce for an AI-enabled future. And hearing the Minister's introductory remarks, of course, he noted some of that early work that is being done to anticipate and forecast the big changes that we're likely to see within jobs and across jobs in our economy and society. He referenced the fact that large percentages of the jobs as we currently know them might soon be transformed through the development of AI and machine learning technology. So I wanted to start there with that invitation for each of our panellists to give us their quick take on how AI is already starting to reshape and change the jobs of Australian workers today. Jeremy, did you want to kick us off, Jeremy?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there really has been a significant step change in capability around what AI can do in the last few years, driven by deep learning and neural networks getting to a point where it can provide superhuman performance in a number of areas and is allowing us to do things that couldn't be done before. This is in the early days of significantly transforming what the job market looks like and indeed transforming society. It's, you know, Australia is still a bit behind on terms of that transformation. So I spent the last 10 years in San Francisco and we've seen it more rapidly there, but Australia is now starting to catch up. We've got a lot of very strong AI capabilities and competence here. And what I've been seeing is AI moving into lots of existing jobs rather than necessarily creating new jobs, but people who are bringing AI into their organizations are becoming dramatically more productive and really increasing their competitiveness.
Terrific opener. Audrey, you've got some insights as well from the sort of data we're seeing in job advertisements and people posting about the nature of their jobs changing, haven't you?
Yeah, listen, it's been so interesting. Some of the research that we've been doing at LinkedIn, we partnered with the Stanford University and put out an artificial intelligence index report. And the results for Australia were really very interesting. In terms of the AI hiring rate, which is, the demand for AI in Australia, we're kind of like on average, we've seen a doubling of the AI hiring rate in Australia from 2016 to 2020. So, it's certainly increasing. But what's been really interesting as well has been that compared, globally, our AI penetration skills across different occupations isn't so high. We're actually below the average. So even though we're seeing a lot of growth in AI hiring rates, they're not, across a broad range of occupations. And so that's something to unpick, as we sort of think about the AI national strategy. Where is that AI skills penetration, deeper than others, and what does that mean? I'd love to sort of also during the conversation have think about the equity side of AI and who's impacted by these skills and who's not represented. We've also noticed a big gender gap, so that's another one to untangle.
Absolutely, and we're going to bookmark each of those and come back to them as we unpack this discussion. Enrique, did you have a few opening thoughts as well on that question of what we're already seeing now?
Yeah, I might just talk about the sector I know best, which is healthcare. And I always like to remind people that this is not the dawning of the age of AI in healthcare. We've been at it for about 20 years. If you'd gone into a laboratory in a hospital 20 years ago, there would have been lots of people in white coats running around. Today, you just go in there and these quiet machines that hum, which are driven by AI, albeit more old-fashioned AI than we have today. So this is not a new thing, and it's already underpinning a lot of the business processes of healthcare. But what I am seeing now is lots of new tools appearing. I'm seeing new business models disrupting the way people work, and I'm also seeing new problems we have to deal with generated by AI. And I won't spend too much time now, just to get going, but just to give you a sense, the FDA in the US about 12 months ago had approved 80 new AI devices. The EU was about 100, and you look over the last 5 years, we're at 300 commercially approved AI devices in the hands of people being used routinely. So it's already out there. In the UK, we're seeing primary care general practice, which you'd think would be the most human of disciplines in healthcare, being heavily stressed in terms of business because of so-called digital first companies that start with AI-driven symptom checkers. And just talking about, COVID and the impact of AI there, AI drives our social media algorithms. It prioritizes exciting news, and anti-vax sentiment is one of the most exciting things to share. So, one of the big challenges we face right now in the middle of the pandemic to get people vaccinated, we're fighting against the algorithm, as it were. So new opportunities, but new challenges.
Absolutely, and that really important role of combating disinformation, misinformation, ensuring that people have access to accurate, timely, scientifically grounded material is so important in a moment like this historically, isn't it? Let's maybe dig in a little bit more to that issue that, Audrey, you opened up for us, which is that idea that perhaps we're seeing a sort of multi-track pattern happen across our economy, which is perhaps some sectors rocketing ahead with the uptake and incorporation of AI to transform jobs and their industry sectors, and others perhaps not going at the same sort of pace. I noted that Data 61 from CSIRO had estimated also that they're thinking we're going to need an extra 160,000 additional AI specialist workers across Australia by 2030. So you've probably got those sort of two strands, haven't we, where we've got the need for a specialist AI workforce and the sort of need that we'll have as a country to train and build that specialist workforce, but then a need to prepare the wider workforce as a whole for the changes that they'll start to see in their jobs. Any of you want to lead us off with a few thoughts on that?
I'm happy to step in. I think, it does feel like it's a bit daunting, Misha. How do we sort of transition our workforce into becoming more digitally savvy, and where are these where are these people coming from that are going to fill up these gaps? But there is a lot of hope, and there's a lot of heart in some of the research we've been doing as well. So one of our most recent pieces has been with the World Economic Forum, and we put out some results in the Future of Jobs report, which is recently released. But it suggests that transitioning into data and AI is not as difficult as people might expect it to be. We found that, particularly in our data, most of the people that transitioned into that particular skill set came from job families that had, that weren't anywhere near that particular skill. It was actually easier to transition into data and AI skills than it was to transition into people and culture or engineering. So, we need to sort of think about this perception that we have that transitioning into these kind of skills is going to be really difficult, because there are many steps that we can take, like micro-learning and upskilling, that may not be as daunting as what we think.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I mean, Audrey's spot on here, and I've possibly trained more of these new AI workers than anybody in the world. Our course has had hundreds of thousands of students, and it's been specifically targeted at people who, they might be doctors, or they might be paralegal, or they might be activists or whatever, and giving them AI skills. And, when we started back in like 2014, this was very speculative exercise. People really thought you need a math or computer science PhD, you need, years of study at, at a university that specializes in AI. And yeah, it actually turns out that's not the case. You do need pretty strong coding skills, but lots of people around the world and in Australia have that. And actually that puts Australia in a particularly good position in terms of the skills we have. And we found with, a few months of training, which can be done entirely online, you can actually reach a world-class level. And one thing I just wanted to mention is, or else I agree with Enrico that AI has been around for a long time in medicine. I also wouldn't want to understate the huge step change in capability there's been in recent years, which is actually why we need a high level of urgency in this country, because we're not actually keeping up right now. We really could be. We have the skills and resources, but we're not really keeping up with a step change. In terms of deep learning and neural networks, I don't see as much activity here. And my best Australian students are generally going to work for American companies because we've still got work to do to really harness this resource in Australia.
Yeah, I think actually, Jeremy, I do agree. If you look at where AI is most embedded, it's in those highly automated or process-driven parts of healthcare, say, for example. And what's very clear in the last 2 years, as I sort of hinted at, is that the new AI technologies we're seeing are getting involved in areas you'd never expect, like, helping people with online screening and counselling from bots. Radiologists, yes, you'd expect them to use it, but physicians, you wouldn't have expected necessarily to have used all these. So the real challenge is to understand what is the skill set that people want. If I look at the early adopters, things like the College of Radiology are obviously transforming how they train to be radiologists, and they're really a step ahead. They're global leaders, I would say, but the remainder of healthcare is not yet engaged, and probably doesn't even know what it should do. Should it learn to code? Should it go to one of Jeremy's courses? Should they rather learn how to be? Of course they should. Yes, safe and effective users. So there's lots of challenges, and I think just getting clarity on what are the skills I'm going to need to do my job is probably the hardest part. I don't see any challenge in terms of capability of the people to learn at all.
Well, and what is our best guess about the kinds of skills that will be foundationally important across, say, the next decade in employment? what do we think people are going to need to add to their set of foundational core skills as workers to keep pace, to remain employed?
The next 10 years is a long time, and I think that's going to change. I think at the moment, I've been seeing that people who learn to code and learn to actually train AI models themselves become extremely, extremely in demand and can make lots of money and make a huge impact. Having said that, I don't think that's going to remain the case throughout the next 10 years. I think increasingly the technology is going to be embedded inside what we do, and there's going to be a lot of kind of specialist work in, for example, in kind of medical labeling enhanced by kind of AI feedback, for example. So I think that, you know, at the moment, I'd say people should be focusing on kind of code and actual kind of foundational AI skills. But yeah, I think that's going to become more and more embedded over time, and the kind of the code side will become less important in a few years' time.
I'd love to add to Jeremy on that too. I think, you know, that human augmentation piece is going to be so interesting and so important. You know, what are the complementary skills of digital skills? You know, which sort of soft skills might be really important as we go ahead? And is communication going to be one of those that feature? And, you know, how do we increasingly focus on improving that augmentation piece between that digital literacy piece and also that human side?
Absolutely.
And as you mentioned earlier, Audrey, also, how do we ensure, you know, a diversity of people having these skills, you know? So that's been a real focus for us is, you know, we have had a number of diversity scholarships. You know, we've tried to increase the number of people from underrepresented groups, but as Audrey mentioned, both in Australia and around the world at the moment, this is not a diverse group of people, and that's creating very genuine, direct problems in terms of the products and services being created not working as well and solving the right problems as they could be.
I'm going to wish you a call out for our fabulous audience to pop their questions into the Q&A function in the platform, so that we can try and work our way through some of the questions that you might have, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. One question that's come already through that is, what can Australian industry or employers be doing right now to start to upskill and prepare their workforces to stay competitive as we start to see these shifts come on at greater pace?
One thing I'd mention in terms of what not to do would be, don't outsource this. I've noticed a particular tendency in Australia for bigger companies to want to hire in some big American company. This is not the right approach, because it's, you know, this is something that's going to become more and more of a core competence, and one shouldn't be outsourcing core competences. It means you're not learning. You know, in my opinion, the first thing to do is to identify you will have people in your organization already who are actually probably pretty good at this, and you didn't even know it because they've been learning in online courses and practicing in the evenings. So figure out who you've already got and connect them together, and then give them what they need to help push your organization forwards.
I'd like to reinforce that point so much, Jeremy, which I like to talk about algorithmic sovereignty. In other words, we do need local control of the capability to develop and modify algorithms. My big fear is that we will revert to the classic Australian model of being exporters of data as primary producers, and then we import value-added products, which are somebody else's algorithms. Yeah. And you know, again, in my world, it just doesn't work. If I get an algorithm developed for X-ray interpretation in China or the US or Europe, and I bring it to Australia, it's going to need recalibration. I'm going to have to fix it anyway. And so you're not going to outsource those skills. So this is core to the way future work will be done. And this is not a commodity product you bought off the shelf like a spreadsheet tool. You really need deep capability. So now's the time to start with a pilot project, an obvious low-hanging piece of fruit. Get going, learn. As Jeremy says, you will find champions.
I mean, this is already happening, isn't it, Enrico? I mean, in the US, the top 5 largest companies by market cap are all digital. They're all software and hardware companies,
right.
and they're all been made in the last few decades. You know, in Australia, 4 of our top 6 are banks. One of them is mining. You know, we've already been missing the boat on this shift, and I think AI is going to really accelerate it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I really enjoyed in the previous session, we're talking about things like manufacturing and aerospace, and at least in healthcare, it's not a designed space. This is an organic, evolved mess, which has just evolved over 200 years. And so therefore, it's not even about algorithmic design. We need to have the skills to understand where to place the algorithms into the workflows, how to do no harm to the system that's around it. And those so-called translational or implementation skills are so important. And often there's such a focus on building the algorithm, we forget that fitting task of taking a working algorithm and making it add value to a business process is a skill, and a special skill. And so my optimism is that's something that we're probably very good at here in Australia, and it could become a national competence. It's going to be hard to beat Apple and Google in machine learning algorithm design, but they're not experts in real world business processes, whether it's manufacturing or healthcare. That's our skill set, and we should go for it.
Really important points about sovereign capability and about having that capability also in-house within employing organisations as well. Just further to that, let's unpack that a little bit more for our audience. You know, in terms of the kinds of investments, Jeremy, what kind of length of foundational courses are you offering? And what, you know, people might get intimidated sometimes by thinking I've got to put people through some long-range comprehensive training program here to stand up a workforce like that.
So our courses, they're all free, they're all no ads. It's all like just an altruistic exercise. And to get to a point where you're competent, so you can build useful models and also kind of assess other people's models, it's about 70 hours of study, and depending on your background. And to get to a point where you can kind of design world-class models that are quite innovative, it's about twice that. And, you know, one thing I'll say actually is, there are a lot of Australians who are actually significantly pushing forward core AI capabilities. You know, a lot of them are Australians who are at Google in the US or at Facebook in the US, to be fair. But, you know, there's a lot of Aussies who are actually genuine world-class experts at cutting-edge AI research. So, you know, I absolutely think we can compete there. So, for example, me and my students a couple of years ago won an international competition in AI to create the world's fastest AI training algorithm. We beat Google, we beat Intel. You know, these guys are not untouchable. They're pretty good, but Aussies are pretty good too.
Excellent Australian spirit of, we've got you world leaders. Audrey, are you seeing shifts as well in the sort of, you know, entry points for how much of an investment people need to make to just sort of get themselves, you know, started down the pathway of training their workforces?
Yeah, I think what, you know, one of the things we tend to overlook are the adjacent skill sets to AI and how we can sort of transition people from those across. You know, one of my big sort of passions is you know, thinking about that gender equity piece. And what we found is, you know, women are very underrepresented globally in AI, but more so in Australia. So we're actually below the global average, which is, you know, really disappointing, but you know, it's something that we really need to focus on. But where women do have a greater representation in, you know, the digital side is in areas like genetic engineering or human-centered design, nanotechnologies, and those technologies are very, you know, adjacent skills to the AI skills. So how do employers and business leaders look to those adjacent skills and start employing people with those skills as part of that AI pipeline. So, what are we doing on that front? So the adjacent skills are one of those. The micro learnings is another. During COVID, LinkedIn partnered with Microsoft and offered a range of, free, accessible LinkedIn learning modules, which just, gave people a bit of a foot up on that digital skills piece. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't need to do a 3-year degree to sort of start on that journey. You can start in micro steps.
Well, another area actually is very important is AI and data ethics, which is an area where, there's a much broader range of people that are in that space. A lot of the best researchers in that area are Black women, actually. And in Australia also, we have some of the world's top people in that space. So, that's a kind of an interesting sub area which is becoming increasingly important, and I think Australia has very strong capabilities, and we also have a relatively diverse group of people working on it.
Absolutely, and I was fortunate enough to go to the Women in AI Awards at the end of March this year and see the breadth of terrific women leaders and entrepreneurs in the AI sector here. So if people are looking for diverse, fabulous female talent to press into services, further inspiring role models to build that pipeline and stronger diversity, there's a terrific wealth of inspirational figures out there. Another question from our audience: is there more value in non-coders coming and learning AI or machine learning than in upgrading the existing software engineers to use and think of directions like deep learning directions, is the question.
I can think of my own experience, running a translational research center, and the easiest path actually is to take the computer scientists who have got decades of technical expertise, and I can train them on a narrow task very quickly. They can become experts on a particular kidney disease, and off they go very quickly. But it takes a long time to take a healthcare person and train them to be as good in the use of technology. So there will always be open arms to those who want to make that journey, and they are critical translational people. But for most people, I would say it's creating a group of people who are sufficiently literate in both universes, the applied and the technology, to be the bridge. I actually think when I look at, what we have here locally, I can see, as Jeremy says, great computer scientists, also, great people who work in the clinical space, but we have a hole in the donut, which is those translational people. And they are the enzymes that catalyze everything. And so we kind of need those folks.
Yeah, it's important, I think, actually not to think of it as a dichotomy of like coders and non-coders.
Yeah.
I know a lot of brilliant doctors and I'm more familiar with the medical space as well, brilliant radiologists who can also code. And they're the ones who are like, everybody wants to work with them because they actually understand the needs, they understand the constraints, they understand the operational integration, they know what problems are important to solve, they know when a solution actually doesn't make sense, so that's, and, to take a coder and train them to be a radiologist, I mean, that's probably 10 years, right? Whereas taking a radiologist who can code a bit and be making them into a strong deep learning practitioners, more like 100 hours of work.
It's a really good point. And that piece of sort of the EQ skills of thinking about the sort of building the social license and uptake and confidence in technology, looking at the sort of human use is really important in that. Another question, inviting you all to sort of cast forward well down the track, perhaps. One of our audience would like to know, they sort of observe that they think technology is going to play an increasing role in sort of the incremental changes we're likely to see within existing jobs. But ultimately, do you think that with time, AI will be capable of doing all the jobs that we could ever require? Wow, we're going to put ourselves out of work in the midst of this answer, aren't we? Or not?
From my perspective, I think I look at the business of healthcare, and there's so much unmet demand that even if we're getting better at, meeting that demand, we're just going to have more work to do. I can see no future in which we meet all people's healthcare needs. So I don't think that's going to happen. And all of the models I see people comfortable with, let's say for the next 15 years, are going to be hybrid AI human jobs. What some people call them centaurs. I don't really know if I like that term or not. I keep on imagining we're going to build a push me, pull you, and that's a disaster. But so I think the human side of business is critical. Absolutely, AI will do things that humans aren't good at. But I've yet to see anything in the pipeline that would suggest to me that we could sit down and have a conversation about end of life or what are the best treatment options for you. If you're going through IVF. Those aren't necessarily machine conversations. So I don't think those soft skills will ever disappear. I absolutely know work will change. What I often do when I talk to medical students, I'll say, look, you'll graduate in a few years' time. You'll probably complete your specialized training in 10 years. And then in your early 40s, you'll be at the, sort of the peak of your career. That's 20 years from now. I cannot tell you where technology will be. I cannot tell you what your job will look like. So the one thing I tell them is be open to radical change in what you do and how you do it. Don't expect you won't have a job. Just expect you might have some very different jobs over the next 30 years.
I mean, there's less than 1/10 the number of doctors we need in the developing world. And, estimates are that it'll take about 300 years to fill that training gap. So the idea that we're going to run out of things for people to do in the medium term, at least, seems pretty unlikely. There'll be plenty of jobs which we're going to need less of those people than we have now. But it doesn't suggest in any way that we're going to run out of things that humans can help with.
Mm-hmm. Audrey, any additional thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the topics that I really love. And I think, I think there's a lot to be said for AI, but having said that, there's also a lot to be said for humans, like our ability for compassion and empathy, to recognize inequality and, feel strongly about making the world a better place is something that is hard for a machine to do. And so I think there's always going to be a space for humans. And, one of the things we do best is evolve. So we've got, the Industrial Revolution brought on technology, and we don't need to do a lot of the things that we used to do many hundreds of years ago. And so we'll find the next thing to do is what I kind of feel.
Indeed. Another question from our audience: for companies who perhaps have few employees who are AI inclined and might not have a large amount of resources to develop an in-house AI team, what might be the best approach to harness AI capability without sacrificing sovereignty? Would a collaborative model with external AI companies, potentially headquartered in Australia, be a pathway they should be thinking about?
I would say do it anyway. Lots of small companies have AI capabilities. Just one person goes a really, really long way. And if you are going to partner with other organizations, it's even more important that you have at least one senior person in your organization who's very deeply understands the technology, because honestly, there's a lot of snake oil out there. Otherwise, you're going to get taken for a ride, and you're not actually going to be building up this competence. All you're going to be doing is teaching some external consulting firm how to do things better, and they'll be using your data to make things better, and then they'll be selling that to your competitors for less than it cost you to build it. So, I don't think that's a strong competitive way forward.
Mm-hmm. Additional thoughts on that? No? Will AI drastically change the overall composition of our labour market? What should we be preparing for is the next question.
Gender equality. If AI is going to start dominating the future of jobs and women are, vastly underrepresented, what does that mean for women's jobs? And what does that mean for, wage equality? And how do we bring about that balance? So absolutely, AI is going to compound the issues that we have unless we start, doing more to encourage underrepresented groups to also, partake in the spoils of AI.
It's a really important point. We've already got a sort of pretty persistent gender wage gap across the economy as it is. Yeah. And when we look at those sort of the STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering and maths, technology and engineering are the places where where progress towards something closer resembling equality has been slowest and hardest. So there's a big task here, isn't there?
Yeah, and there's also this widespread false belief that the reason for that is because there's not enough of a pipeline. So a lot of people are very focused on kind of teaching girls at school to code and stuff like that. But, when you actually look at it, a lot of brilliant technical women leave the workplace because there's just a lot of issues with toxic jobs and, with that whole career. And so like fixing this is not just about teaching girls to code, but it's about like fundamentally ensuring that the workforce is valuing and fully utilizing all the people that are there,
Yeah. And there's a clear-eyed business case to do that, isn't there? It's not just an important principle.
Sure.
Yeah. Enrico, did you have some further thoughts on that? How we really, make further progress on the sort of diversity piece within the workforce?
Look, I think it sort of has been said that we really just need to improve the nature of the cultures of the organisations that we have, and just really, just root out these old biases and perceptions. And computer science, historically perhaps has been very male dominated. In the healthcare space, the gender balance is very different, but the skill sets are also very different too. So, maybe we see, on our shop floor less imbalance, but I don't think across the whole thing it's the case at all.
Getting to critical mass is also important. Transformations in cultures happen when you hit that critical mass tipping point. And so, recruitment exercises that actually actively go out to build the critical mass as their insight, I think, are often most effective and have most durable results. What sort of changes are we going to see? I know, Jeremy, you brought up that issue about the sort of the discussion around the pipeline of school students and young people into the foundational skills of maths and coding. But what sorts of skills are we going to need our school level education system to start to really emphasise and extend people's learning in to prepare that generation and beyond for the bigger changes ahead?
I think, again, probably talking about healthcare, but we just need to teach people to be safe users of the technology. It's already the case that you can download AI-driven symptom checkers to tell you what might be wrong with you, but people need to be aware that these are limited, flawed technologies. If you're feeling crook, go and see a doctor. So there needs to be, I think, an understanding of how wonderful these things are, but also to make it transparent about how you decide to base your life decisions based on these prompts that you're getting. And I guess we often say things like AI is already here. It's shaping your Twitter feed. It's shaping the results you see on Google, but that's all behind the scenes and non-transparent. And the fact that two people can have different Twitter streams just based on the implicit models Twitter has of you is problematic if you don't know that's happening. So I think this is probably a whole life thing we need to be talking about. Even how we teach our children about safety, tolerance of each other. There's a big push right now, around diversity and safety. This should be another thing that is just bread and butter as part of education.
And in the end, it's kind of a lot of that is about understanding the actual capabilities and limitations of the technology. And one of the things we found is at least for me, I don't know if this is a shortcoming of me or a general issue, but I find it very difficult to get students to really understand that if they don't understand a reasonable amount of the actual technical foundations of what's going on. And if I think back to my schooling at high school, the kind of stuff I was learning, and I think it's still the case, is at a fundamental technical level isn't necessarily that well aligned. You know, I'd love to see, you know, high school students in math learning more stuff like linear algebra and statistics and machine learning and stuff like that. And then so that then they can go to university and study topics that are going to directly help them to kind of understand AI principles. I feel like even our school curriculum, you know, is kind of created for a different age in some ways, and maybe some of those important foundational technical skills are missing still.
Mm. We've also seen a bit of a comparative slide in our performance at that sort of, you know, the seismic levels at which we measure maths and science skills across the school years relative to some of our big economic competitors across the world as well. So there's clearly further work that we need to do together on that front as well. Another question from one of our audience members is, what role could vocational education and training and that sector play in skilling this emerging or existing workforce? Thoughts on that?
Yes.
Excellent. Always better than the alternative.
I mean, that's where most of this is happening, right? I mean, Audrey's talked a bit about kind of micro-credentialing and micro-courses. My courses are all online. Nearly everybody taking them are at work. You know, I mean, they're not necessarily taking them at work, but in their evenings, on their weekends. I think increasingly a lot of the skills people are building up are after they finish school. And certainly this is a skill which is very well adapted for that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to also give a bit of a shout out to GovHack and some of the other initiatives that are out there where, you know, young people can sort of form groups, get together and work on a project, use their, you know, coding skills and learn from each other. So it's great to have that cultural piece within the country as well, where, you know, people come together and focus on those on the digital side and the data side too. So I think, you know, that's a great positive.
Yeah, and that idea that you're sort of constantly dipping back into your professional education and continuing education rather than, you know, I've acquired my formal education and now I'm off into the world of work, and, you know, not referencing back to that sort of upskilling as a continuous process. What business collaboration opportunities do we see, is our next question, in potential application in the community sector and not-for-profit? So things around the use of AI technology in engaging communities, citizen learning, democratising access to technology.
It's such a big area, isn't it? Look, I think, you know, most people in this space now are used to the discourse around ethics and biases. You know, if we're talking about social justice, people need to be aware of the risks, you know, in terms of algorithmic decision making, which I'm sure I don't have to explain to anybody here. So I think what probably are to the community niche issues within our community probably need to be brought out more widely. I love citizen juries. We're all debating what it means for them, what we should do. So our challenge probably is that there's still not enough of a core group of folks in the AI space to do all these things. But I agree with you know, Audrey and Jeremy that the training required to be sufficiently competent to go out and help is not that onerous. You know, there's just, you know, endless ongoing micro-credentialing, so we can do that. In academia, I think there's huge willingness to engage. You know, I've got colleagues in legal faculty who you know, are interested in the impact of AI on ownership of IP, you know, who can own an AI, in terms of justice, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the whole social impact of these technologies is unfolding slowly before us, and it's very hard right now to even know what all the things will be that we'll be talking about in 5 years.
And I love it when I, quite regularly receive emails from professors who are in some totally different area, and they'll just email me and they'll say like, oh, I'm in geosciences or material science or law, and I took your course and started doing deep learning, and here's the things that we discovered. It's really cool to see, people retraining even at this kind of very senior researcher level, and we're now seeing AI find its way into research in all of these different areas as well as into industry.
It sparks a thought about, that's happening obviously in a kind of organic way at the moment on a piecemeal basis. But do we need to do more and more concertedly to sort of smash these silos of discipline, operation and knowledge, and bring people together across disciplines to see how they can embed this sort of expertise in all the disciplines?
Well, we do. One of the things that I really notice with our students at whatever level, whether they're professors or undergrads or whatever, is this current approach is very fragmented. And so often these people will be the only person in their university department or in their, in their organization who is learning these skills. And so they don't necessarily have mentors or people to bounce ideas off, or, champions at work to help, build new products and services. I think it's tough when there's a new technology coming through. The early adopters, they need community, and they need champions, they need mentors. And so this current fragmented approach, that's one of the issues I think that comes out of it.
It's interesting to talk about smashing things, but COVID has been a big smasher of many things. And, 2 years ago, the idea that we would have nationally funded telecare was a no-go zone. Now it's essential for delivering care in the world of COVID. And what we're seeing is telecare plus AI is utterly disruptive of work in the healthcare space. I can see patients with the AI up there helping me. It's auto translating what we say and creating notes as we go. I'm getting diagnostic hints. I'm getting treatment hints. This is a totally new way of work. So I think maybe we're moving into an age where there are crises, whether they are climate crises or another pandemic, where we just can't get by without doing these sorts of things. And so maybe the kind of old world where it was a decision to get engaged in AI because it's cool, now it's no longer a decision, it's a necessity. And whether that penny has dropped or not now, I'm pretty sure that in 12 months' time, it will have.
Do we need a formal structure or vehicle to bring some of these sort of emerging capabilities together and really, help, particularly for small businesses that want to build this capability, to connect them into this world of expertise in a more concerted way?
Maybe that's part of the goal behind the National AI Centre that's been proposed and the capability centres. You can imagine if there was the healthcare one, then that'd be the place where industry could come to meet with academia. We already have organisations like the Australian Alliance for AI in Healthcare, which is industry and health services providers and academia. So there are already attempts to bring things together, but in the end, the resources are necessary to make these things cook. So whether they come from industry or government, but you're completely right. We're too small a country. We're too fragmented. And if we don't come together, we're not going to get that critical mass we need.
One of the really cool things in this new strategy is this Next Generation AI Graduates Program, which, it's small, but just to be one of those couple of hundred people, they're going to be a cohort, that's going to be a community of people who are learning and building and working together, but from all over the country and from lots of different industries. Okay, 200 is not 160,000, but they'll seed this. And I think once big communities form from small ones. We have a online community through Fast AI of about 40,000 AI practitioners now, and it started with one person, me, and then one person joined, and then two people joined, and it grew from there. So, yeah, I think it's something that we yeah, we all need to do our best to connect people, and then to create spaces to allow those people to connect other people, and hopefully we can build up a really strong community in this country.
Yeah, learning as a cohort often does do exactly that. It sort of accelerates that sort of sense of a community of practice and learning, doesn't it? And Audrey, it strikes me that some of those social media professional networking tools are also really coming into their own now. In a way that connects people with expertise and interests that may not have found each other, a couple of decades ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to what you were saying, Sharon, as Jeremy too, about having those cohorts. I think one of the other pieces in this is a level of transparency about what's the path forward, right? So a lot of the times you don't know, how much effort or work it's going to take to start doing those skills. And so one of the projects, we've been looking at in some of our research has been what are the career pathways you could take to transitioning to AI. So you might already have 7 out of the 10 skills you need, and it's just those extra 3 skills that you might need that give you that the foot up in progressing to that next step. And just knowing that, and just being aware that I'm kind of more than halfway there already, is that sort of sense of encouragement that can sort of really nudge people to make that transition.
That's a really good point. We are heading rapidly towards the end of our fabulous discussion, and time is against us, but just a couple of more quick questions from our audience. One person would like to get your thoughts on what are the top emerging jobs that are starting to feature automation or AI skills to a reasonable degree.
So from a LinkedIn perspective, you can find our top skills on our website. But I think what's more interesting is how those skills are going to be used. So are we using AI skills for a green economy? Where are those skills being employed, and which are the sectors that are really going to benefit from AI?
I mean, one thing I think that feels really underappreciated in Australia. So I just got back here after 10 years in the US. I got back in February, and in San Francisco, I mean, this seems really obvious, but a really big job right now is an AI engineer, a deep learning engineer. And at Stanford, for instance, by far their biggest, I think it's like their biggest course now in first year is their AI course. Like everybody wants to take it, and they have to stream it because there's not enough room. And then I see, people coming out of those courses first year out. So I used to try to employ those people at my medical AI company. Salaries started at $200K US. There's not enough of these people. Everybody wants them. And I'm just not seeing young Australians being told this. People are still being told like, oh, you're super smart, you did well at high school, you should go into law or medicine. But law and medicine are great careers, but why aren't we telling them there's this huge, pretty newish industry in AI where you're going to make way more money than medicine and law in your first year, and have huge impacts, and then impact all these other fields as well. Like I don't think that's something we're saying loud enough to young people in this country.
I feel like Enrico might like a rejoinder to that.
No, I don't disagree at all. Yeah. Look, to be honest, I'm sure if we trained everybody we could just in machine learning, deep learning, we still wouldn't have enough. The challenge is that there are other roles too. So, I would say to somebody who wanted to go and do medicine, look, you're going to do medicine, but you're going to become a computational doctor. I've got a wonderful professor here at Macquarie with me who's probably the world's first computational neurosurgeon. He doesn't just do surgery. He's busy building, AI-based models. And so the opportunities for these folks are just enormous. And I think, Jeremy, you said earlier on in the discussion that it still is early days, and there are a lot of pioneering roles out there. It's different to the way it was 30 years ago when AI was just a niche thing, and you weren't so much a pioneer as a weirdo. And that was the generation that I came from. Now it's cool and exciting, but what I'm seeing through the courses that Jeremy and others have put forward, or all the way into Stephen universities, is this is now becoming much more regularized. It should be easy now for folks who are excited, who are starting out to go in that area. But also it should be easy for a medical student or a nursing student to get those skills also to become the pioneers they need to be.
And it's not just the skills, right? The resources, like Enrico was talking about 30 years ago, or trying to think, 25 years ago, when I was training neural nets, it was in the big banks. We needed millions and millions of data points, and we literally had to purchase special silicon hardware to run them. It cost millions of dollars. Nowadays, you can train a world-class neural net for free. Google has something called Colab, where they give you like GPUs and TPUs for free. As we've discussed, the training you can access for free. The algorithms we have now using something called transfer learning allow us in many areas to get brilliant results with like 100 data points. So the constraints are, they've just collapsed. And I think, to Audrey's point, if we kind of said to people, here's where you are now, here's what you still need, people would be very surprised to discover how close they are to actually having strong capabilities.
We are so close to being out of time. I just wanted to maybe invite us all to end on a high note. If we can nail all the terrific lessons you've exhorted us to think about today, that securing strong sovereign capability, not outsourcing, but building even modestly from the beginning some in-house capability ourselves, transforming our sense of how do we encourage the workforce at large to dip into micro-credentialing and smaller bite-sized chunks of AI applied education and skills throughout a career and a working life, and build that sort of momentum that will give us the sort of network of people who are expert in this field. If we can nail all of that, what are going to be the upside benefits to Australia? What does that unlock for us as a country?
I would hope that we become an agile and very resilient nation. I'm optimistic in the sense that we have the capability. I worry that externally there are a lot of things happening globally. Climate change, the political space is a bit messy at the moment. And so for this country to be sovereign and to be able to be agile and respond, it's going to have to do this. This is not a nice to have. This is essential to the survival of the nation over the next 50 years. And if we don't do it, we will be an outsourced nation. So I'm excited, but also I'm a bit scared that there's a bit of inertia around. So Jeremy will get us energized. Thanks, Jeremy.
Well, absolutely. I would be happy to, because I will say, as an expat, I've decided to come back to Australia. Despite all the attractions of San Francisco, I mean, I had high hopes coming back here, but actually coming back to Australia after 10 years, it's the feeling for me has been, bloody hell, this is a good country. It really is. And there's a lot we need to do, but we are fundamentally living in a bloody good country. So, I think if we can sort these other things out, we will be the envy of the world. I mean, we're one of the very few countries that actually had a competent enough COVID response to largely keep it out. This is not an accident. We are. We've got smart people. We've got people who are passionate, who care. And a culture of fairness and generosity. So that's why I'm here, because of what Australia is. And I do think Australia, those things would be very hard for another country to kind of add on, right? But the stuff we're talking about, we can absolutely add on to Australia. And I think we can have it all.
Fabulous. Audrey, do you want the final word?
I echo what Enrico and Jeremy said, and I'll add this, and this goes to a comment that you made, Misha. We have some incredible women in AI in Australia, and gee, it would be nice to have a really strong AI presence where we are equally represented in gender. So, that's sort of my vision for where we would be going in Australia. So, great things to come.
Terrific. Thank you all for such a fabulous, rousing exhortation to round out this discussion. I want to thank our expert panel for a really rich and terrifically expert insight-laden set of observations. Dr. Audrey Lobopulo, Professor Enrico Coyera and Jeremy Howard, thank you all so much for your time. Thank you to our audience for listening along and for being such active participants in this conversation as well and making it a real conversation. To end this session, you just need to click on that live stream button that you can see down on the left-hand side of your screen, and that'll take you into the next session. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Bye-bye.